Welcome back in, everybody, to a Football Friday edition of Birds 365. Joined now by Thomas Mott, host of the Thomas Mott Show on YouTube. You guys probably have seen his work, and at Real Thomas Mott on X. Thomas, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for being here on this Football Friday.
Football Friday. Great to be back, guys. And it's nice to be 1-0 after 1 week, huh?
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, 1-0. Sloppy 1-0, but 1-0. That's the most important thing. We'll start there. What'd you think? And defensively specifically, because I've kind of given this team a mulligan. Am I being too kind? The field was so bad. Who cares at this stage? You get out with the win, and now we can start evaluating. Agree or disagree, Thomas?
I totally agree. The field was awful. I think all the Bryce Huff talk, I'm sure we'll talk about, is he going to be a bust on the defensive line? There's no way to know if Bryce Huff or anyone else on that defensive line is going to actually be great or bad this year because they were slipping and sliding all over the place. I agree. I think anytime you go into week one with very little preseason action, the main goal is to A, win, B, stay healthy, and C, look relatively competent. And I think Philadelphia did all those things. And I'll go even further past sloppy. I think that they, or even, backtrack from sloppy, I thought they looked pretty good. I mean, you take away offensively the turnovers and a couple of missed tackles on defense, and they played pretty great against what everyone in the media is claiming to be the, dark horse MVP favorite in Jordan Love, a really great team in the Green Bay Packers. And like you said, they won, and that's all that matters.
Agreed, Thomas. Good takeaways there. I want to, a couple more quick questions on the game before we move into the Atlanta a look ahead to week 2. But Saquon Barkley, man, he comes in, and as you point out, 3 turnovers, and we still put up 34 points. Yeah. Saquon Barkley has 3 touchdowns. What'd you think of his debut in Philly?
I don't know. I mean, Johnny, a little better than Miles Sanders, right? I mean, that was the whole conversation we had last time I was on here. He looks as advertised, and that was the main goal. Is he healthy? And what will he look like behind this offensive line? And A, he looks extremely healthy. This looks like the healthiest we've seen Saquon Barkley maybe in his entire career. The speed and the burst on that first touchdown run was absolutely incredible. I mean, that is top 3 back in the league type of stuff. And really, the holes that were opening up behind Mekhi Becton, behind Cam Jurgens, and the rest of this offensive line goes to show that he is going to be probably the main X factor for Philadelphia this year. Like, what you're getting in A.J. Brown. You know that Jalen Hurts is going to have some really good moments on the ground and through the air. Devontae Smith is going to be great in this offense. But as a defense, when you go up against the Eagles now, you basically have to pick your poison. Do you want to load the box and try and stop Saquon Barkley and then get destroyed over the top by these receivers? Or I think the Packers kind of showed you they wanted to do, stop the receivers, and we'll see what Saquon is capable of. And I think that opening debut is only going to make Kellen Moore's job easier, Jalen Hurts' job easier, because now, especially Atlanta, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a couple of days here, they got to decide, how do you want to be beat by Philadelphia? Is it through the air or on the ground? And if Saquon does exactly what he did in that first game, minus 3 touchdowns, right? $120 on the ground and say 1 touchdown a game, or kind of hovers in that area. I mean, MVP is a real conversation starter if that sort of numbers continue, but top 5 running back in the league again is definitely for sure.
Poor Miles, by the way, Thomas.
Poor Miles.
Poor Miles. But Miles said, I do not think people give credit for Miles the season he had in 2022, but I digress. Do you think that changed, that performance changed? So you're Raheem Morris, you're coming in this week, defensive-minded coach. Are you worried about Saquon Barkley first, or are you still worried about AJ and Devontae first?
I think at least from a Falcons standpoint, you're definitely more worried about Saquon Barkley, right? The Falcons are kind of built to be good against the pass. They have a really good cornerback in AJ Terrell. They have 2 safeties, both of which Eagle fans wanted the past 2 off seasons. And so you feel like they're going to try their luck at covering these receivers with as little people as possible and make sure that Saquon Barkley doesn't beat you. Because again, once Saquon starts to go, he's just like a downhill train. He just runs away from everybody, and there's no way to stop him. And if Philadelphia gets a lead and Saquon Barkley is hot, so you can keep giving the football to Saquon Barkley, you don't have to throw your way out of being down 10, 12, 14 points, it gets really ugly. So if I was Atlanta, I'd go, okay, no Saquon Barkley today. Let's see what AJ Terrell and Justin Simmons and Jesse Bates can do against Devontae Smith and AJ Brown, which, again, it's, better, easier said than done. But I would take my luck and really try and stop Saquon Barkley first.
Yeah, if you're the Falcons, I think that's a good approach. But, you just saw AJ Brown kind of mess with Jair Alexander like he wasn't a top corner in the league. He's a tough player to stop, man. So AJ Terrell or not, I think those receivers are going to have a good day. But, Thomas, I want to ask you about Jalen Hurts and just what you thought of his opening, week and how he's going to progress in this Kellen Moore offense. He did have a couple bad decision makings. I thought the highs were high. I thought the lows were low. What were your takeaways from Jalen Hurts in week 1?
I think the first interception is probably his worst throw of the night. It doesn't make sense backed up on your own, 2-yard line on 3rd down and 15. And even if somehow Smitty had kind of gotten open, you're still trying to throw a rope, 35 plus yards in the middle of a defense that was really ready for that play. And that's the most egregious one. The second turnover in terms of the drop, in terms of whatever, Cam Jurgens snapped the football earlier, whatever, miscommunication. I don't really chalk that up to anything. I think the other interception, when you go back and watch the film, Brian Baldinger did a great breakdown for the NFL Network. AJ slips, he's open, the ball's a little bit late, it's still across the body, so you don't like it. So sure, there were plenty of ups and downs from Jalen Hurts and plenty of downs that Eagle fans should be concerned about, but the expectations were sky high based on everything we heard from training camp. He doesn't throw interceptions anymore. He hasn't thrown an interception in, 300 snaps or whatever the number was in 35 days. And then
blame Elliott for that one.
Yeah.
I tried to temper people.
And yet, you knew he was going to throw an interception early in this game. I just felt like it was almost a guarantee. But as you mentioned, Zander, the highs were extremely high. And if you go back, and I was watching, there's a guy on YouTube, he did at the quarterback room. I forget what his channel is named, but he
QB
goes
school.
like,
JT O'Sullivan. He's great. Yeah.
Full hour basically of Jalen Hurts' performance versus the Packers. He had some really great highs. And you can see how Kellen Moore's scheme has really opened things up. But the main takeaway from 2023 Jalen Hurts to 2024 Jalen Hurts, guys, is the blitz recognition. 6 of 7 against the blitz. He was absolutely perfect, and he had hot route options when he recognized there was more pressure coming, goes to the line, says something to the lineman, does his little, signal to the wide receivers, and throws hot to A.J. Brown for a first down, comes to Dallas Goedert for a first down. Those were the key things last year that we just didn't have for whatever reason in last year's offense, whether because Kelsey was there or Brian Johnson and Sirianni ran the offense. He didn't throw hot, and he was killed against the blitz. And this game, especially against the Green Bay Packers early on, he, to me, looked night and day better, again, fixing what was the big issue. You take away the turnovers in that game, and Hurts is probably the best quarterback of the entire weekend. The turnovers obviously kind of bring him down a little bit, but I was very, very at least encouraged and impressed that he's going to be much improved from last year.
All right. Too much optimism for me. I think what we're talking about, the decision making, I think and by the way, the Baldy, come on, Brian. That was a bad throw. That's Jair Alexander. AJ Brown wasn't open.
Also AJ Brown.
That is a bad throw, which Jalen acknowledged and owned, by the way, yesterday. There were 2 other turnover-worthy throws that people do not recognize because A.J. Brown turned into a defensive back on one. And the other one should have been a pick 6 before he then back-to-back threw it across his body in the red zone, which is a cardinal sin of quarterbacking play in football. To the point that Nick Sirianni correctly said, not sustainable. Not sustainable. The Eagles were the only team in the NFL to win in week 1, losing the turnover battle. Now, if we go back to last year, that was the whole issue. I pointed out the only difference between the Eagles' 22 offense and 23 offense is basically the turnovers. They were better on 3rd downs, statistically. They were better on 4th downs. They were better in red zone. In the situation, the big situational bet. What was the difference? The turnovers. Before last season, Jalen Hurts, Thomas, was one of the most ball security conscious quarterbacks in the NFL. Last year, I've said pretty consistently I was confident it would turn around because I thought it was an anomaly. And here we show up in week 1, and he made more bad decisions in any other start he's ever had for the Philadelphia Eagles. Why are not people more concerned about this?
Well, I think first off, the comparisons between the 2022 offense and 2023, I think it's a little more than just he didn't turn the ball over during the Super Bowl run and he did a lot last year. I think the difference in Shane Steichen and Brian Johnson / Sirianni is a major reason why he looked that much more comfortable in the offense. And listen, yes, he had plenty of throws. You mentioned the 2 kind of down there in the red zone, one of which could have been a pick 6. First week rust, I think, can easily be chalked off towards some of it. And I also think that it's a brand new offense that he is still working through to try and figure out. We expected highs and lows, right? And the highs, again, were so high that I think we can put to bed, or at least for now, because it's a week-by-week league, calm down about the idea that Jalen Hurts is going to be a turnover machine this year. Because if you take what he did in that game and take away 2 of those turnovers, right? Again, he has almost 300 yards passing. He has multiple touchdowns. He has an incredible drive to end the first half to get points, an incredible drive basically to end the game, I think, in the fourth quarter to get points, and was very good situationally on third down when he needed to be and against the blitz. And so I get the whole idea that Jalen Hurts might suddenly, or not suddenly, might over the course of the past year and a game now be more turnover prone. But last year is really hard for me to look at and go, okay, we know it was a poorly designed scheme. We know that he had very little control over changing the plays at the line, protections, hot routes, like all the bad stuff that you guys obviously, being there covering the Eagles day-to-day chronicled very well, right? There were many giant red flags in Philadelphia last year. And when you go to 2024, you're looking to see where those red flags are. Again, pre-snap, protection. Where does he go with the football on third down? How comfortable is he in the pocket? Is he running better than he did last year when it seemed like he was hurt for half the season? All those things I check. Yes, turnovers, I think, will continue to come down. I think we're going to see a much, safer Jalen Hurts in terms of protecting the football on Monday. And until you have multiple games here in 2024 where Hurts has thrown multiple interceptions and lost games due to it, I think we got to calm down a little bit here. And again, you mentioned it, the only team to win but also lose the turnover battle. I think that gives more hope to Eagle fans, and the fact that this team is so good and so stacked, they can recover from a multitude of mistakes. Whereas last year, Cardinal game, Giants twice, they were not good enough, especially scheme-wise, to recover whenever Jalen turned the ball over. So I got to see him throw a lot more interceptions for me to start panicking, but I wanted to really latch on to the good in that game. And again, beat a really good defense in Green Bay and come out 1-0.
Good point, Thomas. I thought your 3 points too at the top were good when you go into a game like this. September is kind of the new preseason, right? I mean, they don't play preseason, so there's a lot of sloppy football all over the week. Now moving into week 2, you're going up against the Falcons. They didn't look great in week 1. They lost to the Steelers, who didn't even score an offensive touchdown. What's your if you're Kellen Moore, if you're Jalen Hurts, how you approaching this game and how you're gonna beat the Falcons in week 2?
I think it's very similar to everything that I just mentioned, right? Week 1, you're still trying to learn. You got to see multiple weeks of bad Kirk Cousins, multiple weeks of bad Falcons to go, okay, this team is actually bad versus where they're at on paper, right? Before the season, we all thought the Falcons were easily, at least I did, the best team in the NFC South. They finally have a competent quarterback, Bijan Robinson, weapons on the outside, and the defense, which you mentioned, didn't give up a touchdown against the Steelers, is vastly improved from where they've been the past couple of years. And so I think you can watch the Pittsburgh tape if you're the Eagles. They obviously have, try and figure out, how they exploited Kirk Cousins and, try and get excited about the idea of maybe having a lesser opponent than what you played in Green Bay a couple of days ago. But I would be very, very cautious about this Atlanta Falcon team, because if they lose on Monday night, they then play the, I think it's the Chiefs in week 3. Like, they're staring down the gun barrel of an 0-3 start. After putting all this money into Kirk Cousins and all these weapons with first-round draft picks, they're going to come out hungry and really, really, I think, angry to try to prove to the rest of the league that they are not, the same old Falcons from the past couple of years. So I think you got to be very careful. And I think defensively, I don't want to say they're a better defensive team than the Packers, because I said before the Packer game, it's a top 10 defense there in Green Bay. Excellent corners. You mentioned Jair Alexander. But the Falcons defensively are way better than anything Philadelphia has seen from an Atlanta Falcons team or a Kirk Cousins team the past couple of years. And so I think the Eagles should be fine, but I'd be very cautious going into this game just to be like, okay, just because they didn't play well against the Steelers week 1 doesn't mean they're going to look a lot different on Monday night.
Well, and they did play well defensively. I mean, part of it is that they were playing against Justin Fields, so that factors into it. But they didn't allow a touchdown, and 3 of Chris Boswell's 6 field goals were over 50 yards. So it wasn't like that there was a historic week for kickers around the league. By the way, 21 50-yard field goals, which is crazy. Broke the record by 6. That's how much difference there was. So the kickers are getting better and better. But Atlanta's defense, they have players on all 3 levels. I think people don't realize how good Grady Jarrett is. Caden Ellis, whose brother Christian Ellis is a really good linebacker people don't know about. And everybody kind of does know about Jesse Bates and Justin Simmons and A.J. Jarrell. This is a pretty good defense, and Raheem Morris is a defensive-minded head coach. So it should be a good test. But it was interesting, going back to the Jalen. The most impressive thing to me about Jalen Hurts is when you see other quarterbacks around the league, and you saw a bunch of them in week 1, have bad games, bad decision making, they kind of let it bother them.
Yep.
And he was there in the fourth quarter making plays because they were trying to run. They ran Saquon 8 times on that final drive that took 7:26, but they only got 15 yards. The big plays were Jalen Hurts on the scramble, carrying 2 defenders to a first down, and Jalen Hurts to Devontae Smith
Yeah.
on the 2 big throws, where Devontae, by the way, at his size, carrying defenders for a first down on one of them. That's amazing. That, to me, is the positive of Jalen Hurts. He's so relentless. You can play 55 minutes, 56 minutes, and we've seen this in the past during the Super Bowl season, Indianapolis game, Arizona game, Houston game. The team was not playing well, and all of a sudden he puts them on their back at a big moment. That, to me, is the most impressive part about Jalen Hurts. And I want to take that to the defense, which did not play well overall against Green Bay. But boy, early in the game, situationally in the red zone, it was great. So there were little situations where you saw, all right, this is going to be different with Vic Fangio.
Yeah.
And I think that part was positive. So how do you weigh the good and the bad defensively? We've already done it with Jalen, so I'll turn you towards the defensive side. Like Jordan Love left a lot of meat on the bone because of the field. He was slipping.
Sure.
And there were receptions. Dontavian Wicks dropped like 3 passes he should have caught. It could have been like 500 yards of total offense for the Packers if they didn't leave meat on the bone. So where do you kind of weigh that?
I think, again, you go back to the idea of it being week 1. And so defensively, you're still trying to figure things out. And listen, they picked on Avonte Maddox a lot, especially early in that game. The touchdown pass to Christian Watson's was all on Avonte Maddox. I really feel like this defense can, especially in the secondary, greatly improve when Isaiah Rodgers comes back. And I think he will play on Monday night. And seeing how they, put him on the outside in nickel situations, Quinion goes to the inside. I think things are going to improve there. But I overall was very impressed by the defense. I think that last year we watched probably one of the worst Eagle defenses we've seen in the past 4 or 5 years, at least in the secondary, get carved up by everybody. I mean, I go back to that Cardinal game all the time.
I would add worse than like 50 years.
Yeah, it's terrible, right? I mean, Kyler Murray and the Cardinals were awful last year, and they came into Philadelphia in what basically turned out to be a must-win game to win the 1 seed, and they shredded us. It wasn't even close. Darius Slay against the Packers, 2 receptions for 15 yards. People harping on him being a little old and a little washed. Thought he was fantastic. Quinion obviously is going to be one of the key pieces on this defense as a rookie, which is incredible. Carter Johnson and Reed Blankenship played well together. I think they're still trying to kind of work things out in terms of playing together for the first time. And then the linebackers. I mean, everyone, including myself, I had them as the weakest link on this defense. And yet Nakobe Dean looked really good. He only gave up that one kind of deep pass where he, I think, was in zone coverage and let the tight end slip behind him for 20 or 30 yards. Besides that, he was pretty great. Zach Bond, I mean, I know you guys got to see him at training camp, but everything that I kept reading and hearing was, up and down day for Zach Bond. Well, we'll see. We'll see.
Nobody saw that coming.
Really good.
Zach should have been Defensive Player of the Week, but they're not going to give it to two. They never give it to the same team. But yeah, I thought I gave him the game ball. I thought he was the best player on the field. And I don't know anybody who saw that coming.
Yeah, I think the one thing that you got to, again, hope gets better is the pass rush. But go back to the Super Bowl, you have 77 sacks in the 2022 season, and they can't get to Patrick Mahomes because, Reddick is slipping all over the place. I think the same can be said about this field. If they can't get to Kirk Cousins on Monday night, guys, then we can start to really go, okay, is Bryce Huff worth $17 million? Is Josh Huff ever going to be kind of this really good number 2 pass rusher that we all think he can be, and yet he really hasn't been throughout his career? I thought Jalen Carter played a lot better than his team worst PFF grade, which was very bizarre. Jordan Davis flashed here and there, wasn't fantastic. But I think overall the defense is fine, and I think it's going to be dramatically improved week to week. And again, we go back to Jalen Hurts struggling early on, the defense holding well in the red zone, and then it kind of switched to where Jordan Love started to move the ball down the field as Jalen got comfortable. Brand new defense and Vic Fangio, people still trying to figure things out. Once we get to week 6, 7, 8, I really think the offense and defense are going to be absolutely humming. And this is, on paper, a top 10 defense, in my opinion, if the pass rushers turn out to be what we expect them to be. And if Bryce Huff has a sack and a couple of pressures on Monday night, it all gets put to bed, and the Eagle defense is going to be just fine.
Agreed. I think that's one of the biggest things coming into week 2 here is that Eagles defensive line. But I just want to say real quick on the defense, you were impressed with the defense in week 1. I was impressed with the red zone defense. I mean, if you give up 2 touchdowns at the start there, that's a different football game. But you give up 2 field goals, it's manageable. Eagles then take the lead. I thought that was huge on the defense to get 2 stops there early in the season before the Packers offense really got going. But coming into this game, you've already talked about it, Thomas. That defensive line needs to get pressure. Kirk Cousins was a little bit of a statue in week 1, not moving like he normally moves. What do you expect from the defensive line coming into this week 2 game?
I mean, the Falcons have worked hard, and I live in Atlanta. Just a little side note here. And so I'm around Falcons fans all the time. I used to work at the Falcons flagship station back in my radio days. And so I was always around those 8-8 Arthur Smith football teams. And they always wanted to improve the offensive line. And then finally they got McGarry and Lindstrom, and they're going to be really good. And they looked awful. And I know TJ Watt is TJ Watt, but overall against that entire Pittsburgh defensive line, it was really bad. And I think Kirk Cousins' movement is a real factor. I mean, this whole idea of him never really being in the pistol, and suddenly he is in the pistol, and he does very little play action, and he had this least amount of movement in the pocket, however they measure those stats these days, in his entire career, is a big factor. And so I think Vic Fangio is going to sit back and go, I think we can blitz the heck out of this guy and prove either that he can't move and we're going to get a ton of sacks, or he's going to beat us on a couple of one-on-one routes on the outside, and that maybe he is healthy. Then we back off and play the rest of the game a little bit more conservative. But I think you try and light up Kirk Cousins. I think you literally go, Kirk, love you. I think he's been a good quarterback in this league. I think he's, should make the Falcons a lot better. But if that Achilles isn't healed and he can't move, you got to send 4, 5, 6, 0 him. You got to go after him as much as possible, because when you saw it in the highlights of the Steeler game, he's on his back on most of these plays and was forcing a bunch of really bad throws. One resulted in the interception. And I think the Eagle defense is going to do really just fine. I think Jalen Carter is going to have a really, really good game against the interior of that Falcon defense. So I'm pumped. I think the Falcons are a great week 2 opponent, guys, after Green Bay, because we have all these questions based on the field and the travel and Jordan Love this and Jalen Hurts that. If you go in and you beat up on the Atlanta Falcons and you win 31-10, 31-17, Saquon goes crazy, Jalen doesn't turn the ball over, defense gets multiple sacks, I think everybody in Eagle Kingdom is going to go, okay, all right, this team is as good as we thought. Week 1 had its little week 1 outliers and week 1 weirdness, but going forward, this is a very, very good football team, and I really hope that they can prove me right on Monday night.
Yeah, I think there's that opportunity. I see it the same way with Jalen Carter. I mean, this should be a big Jalen Carter week. If you look just the matchup, that's the weakness of that Atlanta offensive line, as you know, being down there. I do think McGarry and Lindstrom are good players. Jake Matthews has obviously been a good player for years, but TJ Watt is different, man. I mean,
pretty good.
Yeah, he can make even good players look bad. So I give them sort of a little bit of a pass when it comes to dealing with TJ Watt. But yeah, the Cousins impact. I don't care what Atlanta says, and they're bending over backwards to say he's healthy.
Right.
He's one of the best play action quarterbacks in football, and you don't use him in play action, then you have the worst offensive coordinator in football. And Zach Robinson comes from the Rams, and all the Rams do is play action.
Yep.
So I find it very hard to believe that Zach Robinson comes from that environment and says, oh, my great play action quarterback, and I don't run play action. He's not healthy.
I think the weirdest part of the entire Falcon thing is that they chose to basically not play Michael Penix in the preseason. He had 1 or 2 drives in their opener, and then they literally came out and said, we don't want to play Michael Penix. We think he's good to go. Kirk's going to be the guy anyway. But if they knew Kirk Cousins was going to be 80%, wouldn't you have wanted Penix to get those snaps, right? We are, at least in Atlanta, they're trending down the line of a 1-4 start, a 2-5 start, and the Penix calls are going to be going crazy. And so it's just so bizarre to me that they have this quarterback they drafted in the top 10 to be the replacement because apparently they thought, oh, I don't know, maybe Kirk's not going to be 100%. Then they don't give him reps in the preseason. And so now they got to ride with Kirk. And then I guess a really green Michael Penix, if we get to that point, it seems very poorly managed and very obvious that Kirk is not 100%. Now, if you liked us up on Monday night, John, then maybe we just, okay, week 1 outlier, right? But the movement seems to be a real issue.
Yeah. Well, Nick kind of pointed out, and this was an interesting point that I said, yeah, maybe. Yeah. He mentioned when you have a difficult rehab, and with Kirk, it was a torn Achilles.
Mm-hmm.
You have some good days and you have some bad days. And maybe last Sunday was a bad day for him, and maybe this Monday is a good day for him. So you got to be prepared.
Yeah.
And I think that's how the Eagles are handling it. And then you brought up the fact of their schedule, upcoming schedule, and what it looks like on paper, and it could be a really bad start. But you play into the desperation aspect of it at all, because Atlanta's going to be a desperate team to turn around something in week 2.
They're a desperate fan base. I mean, literally after all the moves that they made this offseason to really, again, give them the best team that they've had in 5, 6, 7 years since the Matt Ryan years, way back whenever he was actually in his prime. They still didn't sell out Mercedes-Benz Stadium week 1. Like literally the most hype you can have for your football team is going into week 1 because we're all 0-0. The Panthers think they're going to win the Super Bowl. The Falcons, the Eagles, we all think we're going to be good. And they still didn't sell it out. There were still way more Steeler fans in Mercedes-Benz than Falcon fans. And if this continues and they lose games early on, there's going to be nobody there by week 8, right? And that's the whole
Thomas, I don't want to insult your city, but that's a bad sports town, dude. That is a bad sports town.
It's a sports town that's desperate for a good NFL team. They've had good college football teams in Georgia.
But
Georgia
they
the
win. Braves have always struggled. I mean, the Braves were good. The Braves have been consistently good over a long period of time. I mean, attendance-wise and teams taking over stadiums, it's easy to do in Atlanta. I don't want to. Yeah, it's easy to. Like you could never do that in Philadelphia.
I agree.
Never,
I agree.
Never
but
do that.
If you had 5 straight years, the past 3 straight years of 8-8 in Philadelphia, and then they laid an egg on week 1, fans would start to kind of be like, I'm tired of this. Like, I'm tired of the same thing. And so I get what's happening in Atlanta.
You know what? It does happen with the Phillies. You know what? You're right. I apologize. Because the Knicks fans took over the Wells Fargo Center.
Yeah, they did. First time I've seen that in a long time.
Yeah. Fans get fed up.
So I apologize.
Right. No, I mean, listen, if you give me the same mediocre garbage every single year and yet promise that it's going to be fixed, you gaslight me into thinking, no, we're really trying, and you keep going 8-8. Fans are just going to $300 for an upper level ticket at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. No thanks. Like, why would I pay to watch that? So desperation is really the main factor to me in this one. The Falcons have to win this game, or else it's going to get really ugly really quickly here in Atlanta.
Yeah, newsflash, Atlanta. I don't think they're gonna. But Thomas, before we get your prediction on the way out, I do have one more question for you. In week 1, it was Saquon Barkley and it was Zach Bond. They were your 2 players for the Eagles on offense, on defense that stood out, that were the MVPs of each side. Who's going to be in week 2 on offense and defense?
I am really hoping Bryce Huff is going to be good, and I don't know if I should say Bryce Huff is going to be the MVP because I don't know if I truly believe it. It's more like a want because I think he has the moves. I think he has the ability to be a great pass rusher, and I just want to make sure that all the negative talk about him all throughout Philadelphia this week doesn't get to him, doesn't get him down. Like I'm hoping he channels it and just comes out and is like, guys, I had double-digit sacks with the Jets last year and didn't even play 50% of the snaps. Like, just let me get on a good field. I'll show you what I can do. So my hope is Bryce Huff, but I'm more excited to watch Quinyon Mitchell play again because, I mean, geez, when's the last time we had a homegrown, fantastic cornerback at what already seems like trending at an all-pro level? Like, knock on wood, don't get too crazy, but he looked incredible. So I'll go Huff because I'm hopeful, and then Quinyon because I love what he did week 1. And I think on offense, again, Atlanta's going to try and stop Saquon Barkley. So I think Devontae Smith goes off. I think it's very similar to the Viking game that he had. I believe it was week 2 last year on Monday Night Football against Kirk Cousins when he had an incredible night against the Minnesota Vikings, different team. But I'll take Smitty on offense. And I'll say Jalen Hurts doesn't turn the football over, John. I'm going to give you that
prediction. That's the most important part of all. Hey, First of all, Thomas, and everybody follow Thomas on the X platform. Real Thomas Mott. Thomas Mott Show on YouTube does a tremendous job. I'm with you on Bryce Huff. Everybody says I'm negative. I think Bryce Huff is going to be fine.
Yeah.
With Jalen, hey, the head coach, send the hate mail to the head coach this week. Not sustainable. And he's right. Nick Sirianni's right. And Jalen Hurts said the same thing. He took ownership for the bad decisions. All I'm saying is it's not sustainable. It's got to change. You can't make that many turnover throws in a game as a veteran quarterback in the NFL. And if Dak Prescott did that, Eagles fans would be all over him. And the fact that they were able to overcome it is great, but it's not sustainable. That's the only point.
I agree.
And it's got to turn around.
I agree. All. And if he doesn't turn the football over, this team will score 30 points nearly every single week.
Easily, it
should have been 40, right? You don't turn the football over, they're scoring 40 against the Packers on a very bad field. I think if they don't turn it over, it's going to be a very, very fun night on Monday.
Yeah, I mean, you put up 34 with 3 turnovers, and then even on the defense, you only give up 29 when you gave them the ball twice inside the red zone. So I thought good stuff from there. Thomas, last question, man. What's your prediction for Monday night? I'm going to put you on the spot. What's your prediction?
I got 31-17. I'm very confident. If Kirk Cousins in that offense scores more than 24 points, we're going to have some serious problems in Philadelphia on Tuesday morning. Like, I'll be the first to lead the charge with you, John, that the defense is like, oh, boys, this doesn't look good. But I do not see Kirk Cousins scoring more than 24. I've hit him at 17, and that feels generous. And I think the Eagle offense rolls. I think 31 points is very likely. I'll go 31-17.
No, this is a Bijan day. The only person beating the Philadelphia Eagles on Monday night is Bijan Robinson. I think he's the guy you got to stop. And he's a very talented player, very gifted player, but still very young, still a lot of work to do. But that's the guy I would be most concerned about if I'm Vic Fangio. And you do have to, I mentioned that good day, bad day when it came to rehab. You kind of feel it out. I like your thought there. Obviously, if you test Cousins early and he's got the accuracy and he's throwing the football and he feels good, then maybe you got to back off. But yeah, I'm gonna worry about Bijan Robinson first.
I agree, 100%.
Yeah, no doubt. Thomas, thanks for joining the show, man. Make sure you guys check out his YouTube channel at the Thomas Mott Show, one of the best on YouTube, and follow him on X at Real Thomas Mott. Thomas, thanks for being here today, man. We'll talk to you again soon. All right, brother.
Thanks, guys. Go Birds.
Yep. Go Birds. There's Thomas Mott. Good stuff from Thomas Mott today. I love getting him on the program. He's doing a great job over on YouTube, so go check him out, as I just mentioned. So good stuff there, Johnny Mac. Just 5 minutes left here on not only the day, but the week here of Birds 365. It's a football Friday. We got nothing to look forward to this weekend for the Eagles. The game is not till Monday, so we'll have another show still. So Johnny Mac and I will not be giving any predictions until Monday's show as we lead into the game on Monday morning.
I think you can kind of guess our prediction.
Yeah, I know. Mine is all but the score is out there on what my prediction is for the game. But closing thoughts today, Johnny Mac, on this Football Friday edition of Birds 365.
Yeah, don't jump on the sword. Come on, Thomas. Don't jump on the sword for Jalen Hurts. He's a big boy. He can take it. He knows.
Thomas had good points, though, about the week one and about.
He had his worst grade as a starting quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles. The worst. Like, the thing that I can't stand is the blame on the coaches rather than the players. And I get why people want to do it. I get it. I completely get it. The guy played at a much higher level in 2022 under the crappy offense that everybody thinks. I guess it was a little bit less crappy back then. In the static offense, he played. It was the best offense in Philadelphia Eagles history, to be honest, over their 91-year period. It's a concern to me because it keeps happening. When it stops, I'll be the first to say it. And I give him all the credit in the world for the relentlessness, as I said, and it coming back. But anybody telling you that was a good football game by the quarterback is lying to you. Or they don't understand what they're watching. You do not do that as a high-level starting quarterback, and that's what Jalen Hurts is. I'm not saying he isn't, but from everybody on down, Tom Brady to Peyton Manning on down in recent history, everybody has bad games. That was a bad game. It's okay to say it. It doesn't mean Atlanta's going to be a bad game. Monday night's going to be a bad game. That was a bad game. And they still scored. The positive is they still managed to score 34 points.
Yeah, and I
And
do
they
think it's
still
week one. I mean, John, like I get it. I'm with you, and I was hard on Jalen after the game about it, but it's week one. I mean, you got to add that
Well, it
context.
is week one, but it was week one for Brock Purdy. It was week one for Patrick Mahomes. It was week one for Derek Carr. It was
All
week
guys
one
that
for
played
Baker
great.
Mayfield. It was week one for everybody else who played well, and it was week one for even the Sam Darnolds of the world.
No, you're right.
And
I mean, look,
and
you're right. You are. You're right. Yusto checks in with a super chat. Thank you, Yusto. He says preseason playing time, will that help Hurts with turnovers? I mean, maybe they're not going to play him in the preseason, so now is the preseason basically for him. So that's kind of what I was saying with week one. But John's right. I mean, look, everybody had week one, so you can't single him out and give him the excuse. But I'm with Thomas in that I think he's going to be better. I think he's going to clean it up.
well, I think he's definitely going to be better because he has to be better. That's kind of my point.
I see what you're saying.
I just don't get but that's me. I do get it. I shouldn't say I shouldn't. Nobody wants to criticize the quarterback. There are certain players you can criticize, and there's certain players you can't criticize in this town. For instance, Avonte Maddox. Everybody shits on Avonte Maddox for whatever reason. You can't shit on Jalen Hurts. Not that you should shit on anybody, but you can point out. I can point out Avonte Maddox played poorly, and nobody has a problem with it. And it's not just quarterback versus, because there's certain players. Jalen Carter played poorly. Can't point that out. Not to the level of the quarterback. People don't want to hear it, but he did. He played poorly. It happens. Not everybody has good games, and part of it with the defense was the field. But I mean, there's got to be some objectivity. That's my thing. And I'm not going to lie to you and say he played well. He did not play well.
You're right. I mean, there's no doubt about it. You're right. He has to, if we want to be a Super Bowl team, which is what a lot of fans are expecting, which is what I think the Eagles organization's expectations are, not expectations, but that's what their hope is. You got to clean it up. There's no doubt about it. You're right about that. Let's go to Brian Fleming, who leaves us $20 because we're running out of time here. But we have another big super chat, and I want to get to it. Brian, thank you for checking in, man. I appreciate the support. I got the dog pushing in the office right now as I end the show here. He says, the Hurts apologist. He can't read a defense and needs an aid. In 22, he was helped by the RPO zone read. In 23, Sirianni's awful scheme. He was third in the league in picks. And this year without motion, he's 5 of 13 with 2 picks. I think Brian's going a little overboard there, but what do you have to say to Brian?
Well, the assumption that he plays well, I would need another hour. The assumption that he played well with motion on one game versus didn't play well with motion on one game. Again, if you want to go back to 22 with no motion, he's never played better. He was the runner-up at MVP. So that can't be the issue. The issue is, and again, it's boring. The issue is execution and making proper reads, proper throws, understanding hot reads and things like that. It looks like the early positivity. It looks like Kellen Moore has him better prepared to deal with the blitz than Brian Johnson and Nick did last year. Early, very early. That's the positive. Again, but theoretically, the negative is Jalen Hurts as a starting quarterback has never had that many turnover-worthy throws in any NFL game with Kellen Moore. That's not a positive. Is it Kellen Moore's fault? I don't think so. I think it's on the quarterback. But if you want to shit on Brian Johnson and Nick Sirianni, well, you better shit on Kellen Moore then. Because he never had that many turnover-worthy throws under the crappy Brian Johnson offense, crappy Nick Sirianni offense. I mean,
Brian follows up. He says the RPO simplified it in 22, which, maybe he's right about.
Well, the RPO simplifies it. the RPO simplified things for Nick Foles, which he will admit on Monday
Yeah, but I
night
think his
when he
point
speaks.
was that's what helped Jalen
Well, of
read
course it
defense
helped
or,
Jalen. They
yeah.
scaled back. When they
Right.
started 2-5, they scaled back the offense to help Jalen. Coaches don't get credit for that. Nick Foles gives Jason Kelce credit for his run because he simplified things for Nick Foles and he was able to play freely. It can work both ways. In the case of people blaming it because of Jalen's inability, how about accountability for the quarterback is all I'm asking for. All Nick Sirianni talks about, and by the way, it's not Nick Sirianni. I'm not talking about the Eagles. The Eagles have accountability. I'm talking about the fan base. Accountability for the quarterback, like everybody else, you place accountability on. I'm getting sick of the excuses.
No, I hear you. I get it. You're right. I do think you're right. And the Eagle fan in me wants to say you're not right, but you are right. He has to be better. There's no doubt about it. And that was one of his worst games in terms of decision making in week 1. Let's see what he does here in week 2. Johnny Mac, closing thoughts though on the show. We just kind of gave him here on Jalen Hurts. Brian, thank you for the super chat, man.
Well, that was from Thomas is optimistic. I get it, but I'm like, if we can't admit that that's a poor game, what are we doing? Is kind of where I'm at. That's all. And they overcame it.
Also admit
and
that
I
on the other side of it.
What's that?
Can you also then admit on the other side of it, boy, if he forget being perfect, if he gets halfway better, this offense is going to be unreal.
Yeah, that's the point. That's the point. And that's what Nick was saying. It's unsustainable to think that continue and you continue to get out of games with wins. It's not sustainable. That's the only point. I also am forefront, and I asked the question to Nick about it. The ability to shake off all those poor plays and still make big plays down the stretch, because for whatever reason, because 3 touchdowns, player of the week, it wasn't Saquon on that final drive. It was Jalen Hurts. So he deserves credit for that final drive. The throws to Devontae, the first down run, that's tremendous to be able to overcome how he had played to that point and come up with those big plays late. The relentlessness, the mental strength, all that is tremendous. But the turnover worthy throws are what they are. And if Dak Prescott did that,
we'd rip him.
Ooh.
No, you're right. Mad Bird checks in. Love Mad Bird. He says Johnny Mac is 1,000% correct. So you are, look, you're not speaking into a void. I think people understand what you're saying. Fans understand. We have a knowledgeable fan base. I always say that on Birds 365. Some of the smartest, best fans in the country, so in the world, really, because the Eagles fans are everywhere. But so good stuff, Johnny Mac. Good show. Good breakdown there. I appreciate you putting your point of view out there, especially with that. I know you're an objective reporter and you feel the need to say it, and you laid it out there very well, Johnny Mac. So good show today and good shows this week, Johnny Mac. Any game top of mind for you as we close out the week this weekend? That's not the Eagles.
Woo, I haven't even. Man, I got to think.
Too focused on the Eagles. That's right. You're on.
I'm interested to see our early games. Brock Purdy against Brian Flores. I talked about that a little bit. The Lions and the Buccaneers. Buccaneers played well. I don't think the Lions did. So I want to see the Lions if they can get back to form.
Yeah, they didn't look as good as I thought they were going to look.
Packers without Jordan Love. That's gonna be interesting to see a little bit. Some of the late games look ugly.
Yeah, the late games, the 1 o'clock slate's pretty good. There's a lot of games at 1 o'clock.
Those 4 o'clock games, Rams, Cardinals, Steelers, Broncos. The Broncos Bo Nix looked just.
Anybody that watched SEC knew that Bo Nix sucked, but nobody wanted to listen to me. Everybody says, "Oh, he's with Sean Payton. He's gonna be great." I think he's gonna suck.
Bengals, Chiefs. Bengals look terrible. Bears, Texans. Caleb Williams looked terrible. I think the Texans got a chance though. With CJ Stroud, he's just a natural. And as you see with the young quarterbacks this year, that's rare.
That's rare. CJ Stroud's a special football player. That kid is going to be very good.
Yeah.
He already is very good, but his career could be a good one. I mean,
Some interesting ones. I think Lions Buccaneers interests me most, followed by I keep waiting, and I think if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be Brian Flores against Brock Purdy.
let's see what happens in that game. James Carver knows what I'm talking about. He's an Auburn fan. They were all ready. They were all happy when Bo left and went to Oregon. No doubt, James Carver. He stunk.
He was great in Oregon.
Loved Bo Nix at Auburn because it was an easy win. He stunk at Auburn. But
Ooh.
all right, that's going to do it, everybody.
Alabama hate to Auburn.
Yeah, but Bo Nix did stink, whether you're an Alabama fan or not. He stunk, John.
He was good in Oregon. He was a good college player, but he was also 105 by that point. What is that? His 6 year as a starter?
Yeah, right.
He should be good in college. That's a big difference than being good. He stunk last week. I can tell you that.
Yeah. All right, we're way over time here. Good stuff. It's 10:08. Holy mackerel, Johnny Mac. That's a little bit of Birds 365 after hours for everybody. Appreciate everybody being here. Hit that like button. Johnny Mac, great shows today. Great shows all this whole entire week. We'll talk to you again on Monday morning. All right, my man.
All right, sounds good. Everybody have a good weekend. Get ready. Monday Night Football.
Big Monday game, everybody. Predictions coming on the Monday show. I expect to see all of you guys here on Birds 365. Our Birds 365 faithful love each and every one of you. Thank you for your support of the show and of the channel. We'll catch you Monday on Birds 365.